Greetings, hello, welcome. Happy day to you. We hope that you are doing well today, that you're reaching your highest level of mental, physical, and spiritual strength, and that you're hanging in there very well and rapidly approaching your ability to reach your highest potential. We are glad that you have decided to join us today for this episode of Our Ancestors' Voices, a weekly program sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. We're happy today to bring you our topic, which is Malcolm X was an African. He was no FBA, etc. He was no foundational Black American. He was no American descendant of slaves. He was no xenophobic. I know nothing about Africa. He was no, I'm seeking a payday at any cost to spread disunity among my African people. He was none of that. He was without question a revolutionary Pan-Africanist. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're happy you are joining us, and we give thanks and honor to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. These are the lands of the indigenous people. They always have been and they always will be. There is not a single person of African descent who is here that should, in the name of justice, claim these lands as their own. We were kidnapped and brought here. You have got to respect and acknowledge that truth. And for people who don't want to do that, we say you cannot expect people to respect our suffering when you don't have any respect for theirs. In fact, the people who constantly disrespect other people's suffering, and then they turn around and talk about how we don't have any allies. Who the hell wants to be an ally with you when all you care about is your own selfish agenda? You have no intention of understanding the forces at work that are oppressing the majority of people on the planet. You just see our oppression as a way to try to craft out some sort of payday for yourself. I mean, that's not, you're not someone who's concerned about justice. You just a prostitute working for a payday. That's all. And when I say that, I'm not disrespecting people who work on the streets because they have enough sense not to uh, pay taxes to earn a living. They're smart workers. They're smarter than I am because I pay a boatload of taxes to go for things I mostly don't even agree with. So I'm talking about the people whose values are prostitution values, who sell out at the for anything, sell our people out for next to nothing, just to get the opportunity to have the potential to make some money. So we acknowledge the indigenous people in their struggle. We also acknowledge, of course, our African ancestors who are the reason why we are here. And this program, like every program we do every week, is dedicated to them because we honor the struggle and resistance that they embarked upon, which is really the only reason why we're here. Nobody freed us, nobody did anything for us. We freed ourselves. We fought to gain our freedom. The Civil War in this backward ass country was not fought to free slavery, to free our enslaved ancestors. It was fought because the Northern capitalists wanted to be able to industrialize the Southern U.S. And the dumbass Southern crackers wanted to maintain their system of slavery. And the Northern capitalist crackers understood that that was not an efficient form of production. And industrialization was the order of the day. So they wanted to eradicate slavery just to ensure that they could bring mechanization and increase production to the Southern U.S. And Abraham Lincoln said as much in his address about the Emancipation Proclamation. He didn't give a damn about us. You Negroes out here celebrating Abraham Lincoln. He didn't give a goddamn about us. He said he would have sent us all back to Africa if it was practical to do so. And I wish it would have happened. I really wish it would have happened. But unfortunately, it wasn't practical. There were too many of us here. So this is why they used us as a tool to defeat the Southern U.S. during the Civil War. And so this is our history here. We have to understand that our Africans who fought for us to be here, we give them honor and respect. And so we move on. We just, for introductions for those that may not be aware, Our Ancestors' Voices is a weekly program, same time, same place every week. We are next month will be 6 years of us doing the program every week. That's hundreds of programs. And it's sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, the AAPRP. And the AAPRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass, Pan-African political party with its base in Africa. Base in Africa. My trip to Azania, what you call South Africa, still fresh in my spirit. Just not even 30 days ago, I was there and was able to be invigorated by our Southern Africa comrades on the ground there who are engaging in courageous work to build our Pan-African reality. So kudos to all of our people at home in Africa who are doing this work. And all these people over here who want to claim everything except Africa, the minute Africa's free, we won't even be able to talk about Africa without them cutting us off to out-African us and doing it. We know this. We know that's the fact. We know what they're seeking. They're seeking prestige and resources. And as soon as we struggle and fight so that we have that in Africa, we won't be able to get around these people trying to get to Africa and control everything. But we know who the people are who have been in the struggle to achieve our worldwide unity. We know who they are and we know who they aren't. So our work to achieve Pan-Africanism is outlined in Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, the title, or the cover page rather, which is displayed on this slide. And that work, that classic work, Nkrumah outlines the struggle to bring about Pan-Africanism, one unified socialist Africa, and our strategy to do it, uniting the liberation movements on the ground throughout Africa. This is why we do the work we do. And again, last month when I was there, we did work with comrades from the Swaziland Liberation Movement, who are also AAPRP, the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania, who are also AAPRP, the Zimbabwe African National Union folks, who are also AAPRP, the Zania People's Organization folks, who are also AAPRP. This is what Nkrumah laid out in the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, and this is the work that we carry out on the ground. Africa is primary for us, and I'm not telling you something somebody told me. I was there last month participating in that work, and I've been all over Africa participating in that work. That's what our work is, you all. We're not trying to elect any bourgeois politicians to any office. We're not trying to do any of that. We're trying to build a grassroots revolutionary Pan-African movement all over the world that is focused on one united socialist Africa. No matter what language we speak, no matter what foods we eat, no matter what faith we practice, one unified socialist Africa. And we are doing that work. And this program is one of many that we sponsor. And we have, I mentioned 6 years next month of doing this program every week. We have programs. You can't think of a topic impacting African people that we haven't done a program on, sometimes multiple programs, whether you talk about the Sudan or the Congo or racist apartheid, Azania, whether you talk about Palestine, whether you talk about anywhere else in Africa, the Horn of Africa, Somalia, Ethiopia, Djibouti, whether you talk about our people in the diaspora, people in the Caribbean, whether you talk about our history, we have done programs on that and we'll continue to do programs on that. And we host this program every week. Myself, Ajamu, the last several weeks, Shakura has been doing her report back on her dynamic and outstanding trip to Cuba with the delegation from Vincent Ramos Brigade in December. And I squeezed in there my report back on my trip to Azania there a couple of weeks ago. So we continue to do the work and we are proud to do it, proud to do it. I'll just say this last thing before I turn it over is that I participated in a wonderful conversation this morning with a young comrade, African person, woman presenting person who is just new to the AAPRP. And what happened for this person is when they orientated to join the AAPRP, they live on the other side of this backward nation. They asked the people who conducted the organization if they knew how to contact me because this wonderful person had read my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence, and wanted to talk to me. So the cadre organizers put him in touch with me. We connected. I talked to the young organizer today, and We had a wonderful conversation, and look forward to working with them. They're doing some work to build our Pan-African work, and they want some help, some support, some guidance. And I told them the conversation today is just the start of that. We will absolutely do that. So I'm honored. They said they were honored to meet me. I'm honored to meet them. I'm honored to have somebody that wants to do the work and wants to think that I have something I can contribute to them doing it. This is the wonderful way that we conduct our life, and I wouldn't have it any other way. So I'm honored to share this space, this platform with my biological, ideological daughter, the doctor. That's right, Dr. Shakura Umi. So to get us started, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Umi. She might be having some issues there. She might have some issues earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. And if she can come in, then I see her in there, but for some reason she's not able to communicate. So if I see her in there, I will let you know and give way to Shakura. But let's talk about El Hajj Malik El Shabazz. If you're not aware, this weekend, actually yesterday, is the 61st commemoration of the assassination of El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, Malcolm X, February 21st, 1965. And El Hajj Malik El Shabazz was born as Malcolm Little in Omaha, Nebraska, here in the United Snakes of America on May 19th, 1925. He would be this coming May 101 years old was he still physically alive. His parents, Louise and Earl Little, were both active Pan-Africanists. They were active Pan-Africanists, you all, in Marcus Garvey's Universal Negro Improvement Association, UNIA. And that is important because we want to make the point today that Malcolm always had a Pan-African consciousness. He didn't just gain it the last 11 months of his life. And, the concept that his entire consciousness was created by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is, it's understandable that people in the Nation of Islam want to believe that, but that's not a dialectical analysis of history. No individual's consciousness comes from one person, no matter how great that person is. Everybody's consciousness comes from a collection of their experiences. And Malcolm Little at the time was no different. His parents imparted upon him a Pan-Africanist consciousness. His father, Earl, was a committed member of the UNIA, was a local leader of the UNIA. His mother, Louise, was from Grenada in the Caribbean. Grenada is considered a part of the Caribbean and South America. And she was an active participant in the UNIA. Their marriage was a Pan-Africanist marriage, and they imparted that, obviously. I mean, that I don't see how anybody could not see that. They imparted those values on their children, including a young Malcolm Little. And unfortunately, of course, Earl Little was murdered by a racist group called the Black Legion for his UNI work, even though now these reformists and revisionists try to question whether that happened. I don't, I know the circumstances. I've studied it intensely, and it would be very difficult for you to tie yourself to a railroad the way that Earl Little was positioned there without assistance. And so, now they want to come and say, well, he had people help him to kill himself because he wanted his family to have the life insurance. I mean, that's just nonsense, which they never got the life insurance because he was behind in the payments. So, again, this is why study is so important, because if you don't know what happened, you'll believe it. And it's like Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said, if you don't believe in something, you'll fall for anything. And that's the reality for a lot of people today. So after this happened, the institutions of the United Snakes went to work imposing intense pressure on Louise Little for all of her children, and made it impossible for her to sabotage her ability to get the insurance money, and then sabotaged her ability to get the resources necessary to care for all her children, 6, 7 children. So as a result, she suffered a mental health crisis, and they racked that up to her inability to cope with the reality of her life. Whereas them worthless crackers that put her through that couldn't have handled one fraction of the pressure that they put on her. You know, you see that today. Like, these people can't handle any pressure. The minute they call us, uh what are they, what's the term they use, snowflakes. They call people that don't agree with them snowflakes. And just I'm not trying to say anything rude, but just do experimentation. You all stand in line, have a line where nothing is happening, where nobody's moving, with a bunch of European people, and see how they react. They can't even handle that. They're so used to having everything focused on their needs and centering them. Just have to stand in line for 20 minutes with them, and you'll see how pressure impacts them. That's not a racial statement, it's a sociological reality of their existence. Whereas black, brown, red people, etc., we know that these institutions are not set up to us, so we know we're going to have to wait. So we don't have that kind of arrogance and entitlement about anything in this backward society. So that's the reality. Malcolm was an intelligent child, but because of the pressure and the anti-human, anti-African nature of education in this backward society, he dropped out of school at the 8th grade. And that's what happened. I'm going to check here and see what's going on. See if maybe Shakur has been able to. Have you been able to join us or get your audio going, Shakur, or no? Okay, so we'll keep going with that. So, from Malcolm Little to Malcolm X. In 1946, after engaging in a series of low-level criminal activities, right? Street crimes. And like Malcolm said, don't look down on him because he did that. You're in jail right now. You know, I mean, people break laws every day. You know, all these backward ass crackers and graham crackers talking about, oh, these immigrants must obey the law. You sped above the speed limit yesterday. You lied on your tax return just last week. You did all kind of illegal things. You used illegal drugs just last night. You know, spare us with that BS. Like, we know better. And in a backward society that's based on injustice, you should be breaking some laws. You should be breaking some laws. If you're obeying every law in this society, then that tells us that you ain't worth the air that you're breathing. You should be willing to break some laws in a society that's based on injustice. What the hell is wrong with you that you're trying to follow every law by the people who are working to bring about your demise and your extermination, and you're obeying all their laws? I mean, what kind of fool does that? So in 1946, after dabbling in this kind of lifestyle, Malcolm was convicted and sent to prison, where he stayed until 1952. Now, while in prison, his youngest brother, Reggie, visited him often and introduced him to the teachings of Elijah Muhammad in the Nation of Islam, right? The NOI. And Malcolm joined the Nation of Islam while he was still in prison. And upon Malcolm's release from prison in 1952, he was already a dedicated soldier in the Nation of Islam. And by 1960, Malcolm had played a significant role in helping build up the Nation of Islam. They had a few hundred members. And I'm not saying Malcolm did it alone, but he certainly was the central driving factor in it, in that he helped create the Muhammad Speaks newspaper, which still exists today in the form recreated by Minister Louis Farrakhan in 1977. It's now called The Final Call. But the first version of that was created in Malcolm's basement of his house. So people could say whatever they want about the role he had in developing it, but the irrefutable fact is that the first issue was produced in the man's basement in his house. So you take that and do whatever you want with it. He also helped build several mosques for the nation, and he became Elijah Muhammad's spokesperson and national representative, his chief minister. That's a fact. That's not our opinion about it. That's not what we want to say. It's irrefutable that Malcolm became that in 1957. He became that. And by 1963, there were intense efforts by police agencies to manipulate people within the Nation of Islam who were jealous of Malcolm and his high level profile within the organization. And this was manipulated in an effort to create a wedge between Malcolm and Elijah Muhammad. And as a result of that, by early 1964, Malcolm left the Nation of Islam. Now, I just want to say a lot of people, the dominant narrative about that is that Malcolm left because the Elijah Muhammad had these babies with women in the Nation of Islam. The woman who was one of the chief women in the nation, Tainetta Muhammad, is allegedly one of these women who had um, children fathered by Elijah Muhammad. Elijah Muhammad had a wife, Clara Muhammad. And so this is the narrative that's out there, the dominant narrative. And even in Spike Lee's movie, Malcolm X, with Denzel Washington, this is what's portrayed. And it's portrayed like it's the dominant reason why Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad fell out. And I'm not saying I'm sure that was a part of it, because Malcolm X was a principled man once he made his transformation. He was someone who did what he said he was going to do. And I understand that because I've spent my whole life modeling myself to the best of my ability after Malcolm in that regard. In other words, everybody that knows me knows if I say I'm gonna be somewhere, if I'm not there at the time I'm supposed to be there, call the morgue or the hospital. There's no way in hell, everybody knows that about me. There's no way in hell I'm just not gonna be there, or I'm gonna be 20 minutes late casually and you didn't know. Like, there's no way in hell that's going to happen. And everybody knows that. And I got that from Malcolm. I got that discipline from El Hajj Malik El Shabazz. So I know that, the preachings of the organization talking about sleeping outside of marriage is wrong. And the fact that, in his eyes, however you want to interpret it, Elijah Muhammad was doing that. I know that that grated at Malcolm because he was a man that believed you should do as you say. But at the same time, I don't think that that was even the dominant contradiction. I think there were a lot of dialectical things happening. And I think primarily the contradiction was Malcolm was growing politically beyond what the Nation of Islam was willing to do. And we saw that early stages when Malcolm was still very much within the Nation of Islam. We saw it in 1962 when the Los Angeles Police Department shot and killed the young brother Ronald there, who had clothes from the cleaners they were operating there in Los Angeles. And Malcolm flew out to LA. And Malcolm had every intention. He wanted to organize the Fruit of Islam, the FOI, the paramilitary group within the Nation of Islam. He wanted to organize them to retaliate against the police. That's what he wanted to do. And Elijah Muhammad forbid it. And 2 years before that, in 1960, Malcolm served on the Free Cuba Committee in Harlem, New York. And when Fidel Castro of the Cuban Revolution came there, the U.S. thought they were slick. They prevented Fidel Castro and the Cuban delegation from staying on the United Nations grounds, which everybody that comes to the United Nations does that. It's supposed to be international territory, but they still treat it like it's a part of their U.S. and that they can control who comes there. So that's why the United Nations is a complete joke. But anyway, they tried to outsmart Fidel Castro, but Castro spent decades outsmarting every U.S. president, from Dwight Eisenhower and Kennedy all the way up through Obama. He outsmarted each and every one of them. And so he went and was going to camp in Central Park, which would have been an international embarrassment to the U.S. And they were scrambling around, but Fidel wasn't through because Fidel was a genius. Fidel accepted an invitation from the Harlem Free Cuba Committee, and he went to Harlem. He met with Malcolm X in the Hotel Teresa, and Fidel Castro and the Cuban delegation stayed at the Hotel Teresa. So the most oppressed community at that time, at least one of the most oppressed, the African community, was able to bring a revolutionary leader from another country in and give that leader hospitality to embarrass the U.S. And Cuba has done that to the U.S., still doing it, and had done that since the Cuban Revolution happened. So Malcolm was showing then. Elijah Muhammad didn't want Malcolm to meet with Fidel Castro. Elijah Muhammad was no socialist. But this is showing you the consciousness that Malcolm began to develop. And certainly, Elijah Muhammad has suspended Malcolm because of the comments Malcolm had made about the children who were born out of wedlock by Elijah Muhammad. This was in 1963. In the fall of 1963, Elijah Muhammad told Malcolm he was prohibited from speaking publicly, and he was on a 90-day suspension. And Malcolm X was at an event in Washington, D.C., and he was asked a question by the media about the assassination of John F. Kennedy, which happened just a few short weeks before that. And Malcolm knew he wasn't supposed to say anything. He knew that. He was not confused. He was not under any wrong information. He was clear. He made a conscious decision to defy that order because he wanted to raise the contradiction of what happened in the Congo as it related to what happened to John F. Kennedy. And it's important you all understand that because Malcolm had already an international Pan-African consciousness. And he talked about the chickens coming home to roost. You've heard that part of it, but you got to understand the context. He was talking about the United States of America was responsible for assassinating Patrice Lumumba, the democratically elected prime minister in the Congo. They were responsible. The Central Intelligence Agency organized the entire effort to isolate Lumumba and to ensure that he was assassinated. The CIA station chief there, Carlucci, they were the ones who facilitated that entire process, right? And Malcolm knew this. And so he said that injustice in the Congo is the same as injustice in Mississippi. And until there's justice in the Congo, there won't be any justice in Mississippi. Pan-African consciousness. He understood that. One is not disconnected from the other, like these clowns today want to convince you. Anybody trying to tell you that you can get justice in Mississippi and California and New York and Florida without understanding the connection that has to Africa and the rest of the world is somebody that's out to get a paycheck. That's all they're concerned. They're not concerned about freeing the masses of African people and all peace and justice loving people, because there's no way to do that just looking at one country, because the international capitalist imperialist system controls the whole planet. So anybody coming at you talking about, well, all we got to do is care about ourselves here in the United States of America, that's a con person working to get a paycheck. That's all they are. And if you see that and you see those people sending them, if you're too scared to tell them that, send them to me. I'll tell them all that. I tell them that all the time, and I'll continue to tell them that. So Malcolm left the Nation of Islam, and he announced his break from the nation on March 8th of 1964, right? That's what happened. And this is what Malcolm believed, because the pictures on the screen, you can see it. Malcolm sitting at the bottom right with Adam Clayton Powell waving with his right hand, and Kwame Nkrumah, the founder of the Convention People's Party that brought independence to Ghana, the founder of the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. And Malcolm sitting in front of him at African Liberation Day in Harlem in 1960. This is where this was. This is long before Malcolm had almost 4 more years in the Nation of Islam, right? But this is showing you his international consciousness, right? Malcolm in the upper right, meeting with Miss Fannie Lou Hamer, who Malcolm invited, the sharecropper woman from Mississippi, who opened up the voting process in this backward-ass country. And Malcolm invited her to Harlem and had her speak to his organization after he left the OAAU. And as I mentioned, Malcolm met with Fidel Castro in the Hotel Teresa in 1960, and the upper left picture is a picture of that. So it's important to understand that, because today every radical, revolutionary, nationalist African organization wants to claim Malcolm's legacy. And that's a wonderful thing, right? But there are some irrefutable truths that cannot be ignored, right? It's important to study the history, because the folks who carry on the legacy of the Revolutionary Action Movement, Muhammad Ahmed, they will tell you that they had drafted Malcolm as a leader in their organization. And based upon the credibility of those people, they have tremendous credibility in my mind. I believe that happened. That's exactly what happened. Malcolm agreed, at least on some level, to be a leadership personality in the organization. Unfortunately, he didn't live long enough to do that. The folks who are the inheritors and the living organizers today for the new African independence movement, in whatever form it takes, whether it's the legacy of the New African People's Organization, or certainly the Republic of New Africa, and even the offspring of that, the Malcolm X grassroots movement, and all of those organizations that subscribe to New African independence politics, they certainly have a claim to Malcolm X without question. And the folks who were in the Republic of New Africa, just like the folks in RAM, say Malcolm agreed to play some role. And again, they have incredible credibility. Whether you're talking about Omari Obadeli, whether you're talking about Chokwe Lumumba, they have incredible credibility. These are the people that I grew up on, and I have nothing but respect for them. Even though I'm not a part of their organizations, I have nothing but respect for them. So if they claim that, I believe it. Because these are people that they're not making up stuff like these clowns on social media today. These are people who put their lives on the line struggling for us. The most serious risk they took wasn't just to get corporal tunnel from typing a bunch of bullshit on a computer every day. They put their actual lives on the line. And I put my life on the line. So I respect that and understand it. And we'll listen to that. But we also have a claim to Malcolm's legacy because he was without question committed to Pan-Africanism. And we know this, right? Secondly, we know this because there's plenty of evidence to demonstrate Malcolm's very radical, very revolutionary, very Pan-Africanist direction, right? Starting with a lot of the incidents we've talked about, meeting with Castro, the incident in LA, his statements after JFK, but also let's talk about what Malcolm did after he left the Nation of Islam. He laid out his clear Pan-African vision with his founding of the Organization of Afro-American Unity, the OAAU, in 1964. Now, if you understand the history, and again, we're dealing with a lot of people today that don't read. It's a dirty four-letter word to them. They just don't do it. They refuse to do it. But if you study that history, then you know that Malcolm articulated clearly that the OAAU was a brainchild he had after he visited Africa, after he met with Secretary, after he met with Kwame Nkrumah. And he talked about how Kwame Nkrumah had founded the Organization of African Unity, the OAU, the year before in 1963. And Nkrumah founded the OAAU along with Haile Selassie in Ethiopia. At that time, this is before the proliferation of neocolonialism in Africa. So at that time, Nkrumah believed that the emerging independent states in Africa could form unity and could bring about African unity that way. Now, of course, after the incident in the Congo in 1960, 61, and Nkrumah's own government being overthrown in Ghana by the CIA again in 1966, as well as efforts to overthrow Keita's government in Mali in 1968 and other incidents, it became quite clear to Nkrumah that unity could never happen at the level of the governments because the governments were corrupted, and the unity had to happen on a grassroots level. So instead of top down, it had to be bottom up. And this is why he wrote the Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare and called in 1968 and called for revolutionary Pan-African formations who agreed with one unified socialist Africa to unite. And that's why in the handbook, he called for the creation of the All-African People's Revolutionary Party, the unity of all these liberation movements into the All-African Committee for Political Coordination, and that AACPC on the Central Committee member level being the actual All-African People's Revolutionary Party and the All-African People's Revolutionary Army. That's all in the handbook. If you read it, you would know that. But going back to 1963, 1964, Malcolm X saw the OAAU as the U.S. chapter of the OAU at that time. the U.S. chapter of bringing about Pan-African unity. And you have to understand that Malcolm, when he went to Africa, he wasn't there as a tourist. He was treated as a diplomat. So for those of you like these xenophobic anti-Africa people, they're always talking about nobody in Africa ever did anything for, shut the hell up. When Malcolm X was public enemy number one in this country. And when he went to Ghana, he was given a driver. He was given the opportunity to have access to whatever he wanted to carry out his analysis. He had meetings with Kwame Nkrumah. Do you think Nkrumah didn't know that by doing that, he was uh, enacting and proliferating the anger of the U.S. administration against him? Do you think that Secretary didn't know that when Malcolm was there in Conakry, Guinea, Secretary gave him a driver, a personal cook, a bodyguard? Do you think that Touré was unaware that by doing this, he was infuriating U.S. imperialism, French imperialism, all of these people? They knew exactly what they were doing. They weren't concerned about that. They were concerned about building an international Pan-African network of people. And this is the reason why if you study the history of Kwame Ture, formerly Stokely Carmichael, and study what he had to say, what he talked about in his own autobiography, he talked about, and Nkrumah told him in 1968, when Kwame, who was Stokely then, visited Guinea-Conakry, where Nkrumah was after he was overthrown in Ghana, and Nkrumah told him in the Via Sili there, he told him that I wanted Malcolm X to come 4 years before this. In 1964, I wanted him to come and be because he had asked Kwame to be his political secretary. He's like, I wanted Malcolm to do that. And he said Malcolm told him that his wife was just not ready to move to Africa. So he needed to do work here. So Malcolm didn't come. But there's no question that Malcolm understood what Nkrumah was asking him to do and supported the work. No question about that. So this is the reality. But Kwame Ture didn't have, 6 daughters and that type of, and at that time he didn't have a wife. He was just a young man in his 20s. He wasn't Malcolm. He wasn't in Malcolm's position. So he, of course, accepted 4 years later what Malcolm was unable to accept in 1964. But without question, Malcolm understood the assignment and knew what was going on, knew what Nkrumah was doing, and was certainly the highest expression of that was his founding of the OAAU. So let's talk about Malcolm X and these so-called foundational Black American people, FBAs, right? Like this picture is, one of the ones that some of them, I'm not saying all of them, but some of them, because they have different, I've talked to a number of them, they have different varying degrees of their philosophy. I've talked to some of them who are ignorant as a bag of rocks, and I've talked to others that had a pretty decent understanding of what we're up against. And the others that I talked to, the ones with the decent understanding, they have I talked to a brother in front of a restaurant in Oakland a year or two ago. And that brother, I had on something Pan-African, and he said, nice thing. And he said, well, I'm FBA. And I said, well, I'm not, I'm a Pan-Africanist. And he said, I respect that. So we had a conversation. I respect that. So people like that, but he said, well, I just believe, I want to be able to do work here. Okay, do that. We stand for organization. I said, what are you doing on the ground? And he said, well, we're trying to get some things going. I said, well, that would be our problem, not really what you believe. If you want to believe you want to organize Africans in the U.S., there are plenty of organizations like that have that philosophy. So we can never be accused of being against that. We organize on the ground here too. We just organize for a broader perspective of the struggle, but we still do it. So nothing against that. But I told him, you got to get your program underway and you got to do the work. And it cannot be rooted in backward xenophobic philosophical beliefs. Like you can't think that African people from other countries are not a part of our struggle. That doesn't benefit anybody except our enemies to believe that. When people like Cornel West get on TV like he did, and they say that the slavery we experienced, because he's one of these clowns, the slavery that we experienced was worse than anyone else. What is your evidence to prove that? When you say he's supposed to be a scholar, When you say something like that, you demonstrate to us that you don't know what the hell you're talking about, right? You have not studied the slave system that our people experienced. You're going to say that our slavery here in the U.S. was so much worse than what our people experienced in Haiti, in the Caribbean? They had so many slave revolts in Haiti that it turned into the Haitian Revolution. And you're going to tell me that we had, I mean, you clearly don't know a goddamn thing. You're going to tell us that I went to a plantation in Jamaica, the Sam Sharp plantation, where they had sugarcane production. They had our people doing the sugarcane production. And they had our people, they put the sugarcane stalks in this device, and you had to carry a chain around, and it sucked in the stalks, and it, squeezed out the juice. And the brother that was showing me the plantation there in Jamaica, he was saying that when our people got tired from doing that in the hot sun, they would have mules do it. And the white woman said, well, oh, the poor mules. And we cussed the white woman out. We didn't give a damn. We cussed her ass out. We said, you shouldn't even be here. You're a disgrace. Get the hell out of here. And she got scared. I feel threatened. I'm like, you should. It might be a threat. We have to decide whether it's a threat. But you're not going to come here and disrespect our people and our suffering. So that kind of stuff, those kind of statements are, that's not acceptable. We would not allow that. If you want to just organize our people here, then go ahead and get organized. But we will not allow that. But to claim that, you're somehow, like this picture, you're connected to the Black Panther Party, which without question was international in scope. I mean, this is the stuff that we need to nip in the bud. These people talking about the original Black Panther Party, about 30 years old. How the hell are you the original Black Panther Party? And talking about the fight against ICE isn't our fight. There's no way that Huey P. Newton would have said some dumbass shit like that. I'm just telling you, he would not have said that. No way he would have said that. So if you represent that legacy, then you need to get much better informed. I mean, there's no way that the Black Panther Party that I grew up under, that many of them still mentor me today, would have said some dumb stuff like that. No way. So in 2026, everyone from the racist right to these so-called FBA want to claim Malcolm. But what do all these opportunists have in common is a lack of study of Malcolm's ideas and work. They don't study Malcolm's ideas and work. Because if they had, they would see Malcolm's clear internationalist consciousness, evidenced by his clear analysis connecting what's happening to African people all over the world. Right? All over the world, they would see that. And they would know that they don't have any body of work, these FBA folks. They can claim that they're connected to organizing Africans anywhere, but where's the work? Where do we see the work? Right? I say it all the time, and I'll say it again. I've been in the All African People's Revolutionary Party. This May will be 42 years. And that has been 42 years of, I say this all the time, the All African People's Revolutionary Party has been at the same time the best thing and the worst thing that's happened to me in my entire life. And what I mean by that is this struggle has been one of it's constant work, it's constant unappreciated work, constant disrespect, constant. These are the norms when you do this kind of work in a backward society. Ain't nobody trying to welcome no revolutionary work that's where you're calling for people to do stuff that they're too afraid and too selfish to do. They don't want to hear you. So they're going to target you. They're going to gaslight you. This is the story of our lives. This is the story of my life. And I wouldn't have it any other way because I have never been confused about one thing. I continue to stay in this organization for one reason, and that's because I agree 100% with the mission in the work that we're carrying out. And you should never be in an organization unless you're driven by the mission of that organization. And our mission is to bring about worldwide African unity based around uplifting our mother Africa, making her primary, and doing so under scientific socialism. I agree with all of that I just said 100%. I will agree with that until I die. And there is nothing anybody will ever be able to do to derail me from understanding that mission and dedicating my life to carrying it out. I don't care if I dislike everybody in the AAPRP. I'm still going to do that work because I have been all over the world and I have seen that we have people talking about one unified socialist Africa in Tanzania. I saw that last month. In Ghana, I saw that 2 years ago. In Guinea-Bissau, I saw that 3 years ago. In Gambia, I saw that 20 years ago. In Senegal, I saw that 25 years ago. In every other place, Tanzania, I saw that 10 years ago. Every other place in Africa, I can't even remember right now. I've seen that. Whether they said it, one unified socialist Africa in Swahili, whether they said it in Zulu, whether they said it in Akan, whether they said it in Ga, whether they said it in Mende or Malinke or Wolof, or whether they said it in French or Portuguese or Spanish or English, that doesn't matter. Everybody is saying one unified socialist Africa. I don't see anybody else doing that. If you know who is on that same level, let me know. I'd be happy to support their work. But that is the reason. And I'm not comparing us or competing with anybody because everybody should be doing this work. We would love to have more people doing it. You could do it. You could say that AAPRP ain't doing nothing. We're doing this. Hey, do your thing. As long as you organize our people for international unity and Pan-African unity, I'm all for you. So I know that we're doing this work because I've been on the ground doing that work in the areas I just mentioned and many more areas. And so that's the reason why I'm here, right? And so I say to anybody, what's your body of work? What are you doing? You want to know my body of work? All you got to do is Google my name and you'll see it. And you also see all the times I get doxxed, all the people that want to show my face and my address so that I can be physically attacked. You'll see that. Nobody does that to somebody that's not doing any work. Nobody does that to somebody that's just sitting in their house typing from a computer. That happens because you're out here making a difference. So I'm honored that these people want to cause me harm. And one day they just might do that. But I'm not no goddamn coward. I don't care. I don't spend a second worried about that because they will get one chance, okay? And they better be good because if they're not, they won't get a second chance. And that's all there is to that. We're going to continue to do this work. I get threats from fascists all the way. I had one yesterday write me and tell me, I get him every day. He tell me like, we're going to put you back on the cotton field. And I said, you're so goddamn stupid. You think that's an insult. I'm proud of our people and how we fought through that. You're so stupid. You think that's an insult. That's how stupid you are. So I don't need to worry about you because I see you coming a mile away. So you better make sure you have the best life insurance. So we are committed, right? We're not just gum bumping and doing that. We're out here on these streets, putting our lives on the line, and we will continue to do that. And we are training younger people to do it so that the struggle can continue and we can continue to organize and solve our problems. And all you folks who are claiming all these strange ideologies, I'll say this. You're foundational Black American, you're American descendant of slaves, you're indigenous to the Americas, Hebrew Israelites, I don't really care. Be whatever the hell you want to be, because one thing I know that's irrefutable. Once Africa is free, united, and socialist, that will mean that all of the bauxite for aluminum will be controlled by us. All of the gold and the diamonds will be controlled by us. All of the zinc and the steel to build cars will be controlled by us. All of the cocoa, 75% of the chocolate you're eating comes from Ghana, but it's not controlled by us. It's controlled by Nestle and Godiva and Hershey. It'll be controlled by us when we have one unified socialist Africa. All of the rubber in Liberia will be controlled by us. All of these resources, all of the cobalt and the coltan that allows us to have internet, allows us to charge your batteries, right? Allows you to do that. I just bought an e-bike. It's the best thing in the world. I rode it for 30 miles yesterday, and it has a battery that has to be charged. That's Africa doing that. All of that When we control all of those resources, no way in hell these people are going to be claiming all the, I don't care what the hell you say right now today. No way in hell are we going to be hearing you claim all these fantasy identities once Africa is free, united, and socialist. Once the power is in Africa, since all you're doing right now is seeking prestige, seeking resources, there's no way you will ever be able to convince us that once Africa is free, united, and socialist, you're not going to jump on that bandwagon. You're not going to try to jump on that bandwagon. And we'll tell you right now, we're not even going to be mad at you for that, because we want all our people to be free. So Malcolm was a revolutionary Pan-Africanist. He was no FBA or none of that. He was none of that. Malcolm understood clearly that our future is tied to Africa. You read the book, the last 11 speeches of his life, the final speeches of Malcolm X, not the last speeches. That's a different book of his speeches. The final speeches of Malcolm X. It has a red and black cover. Read that book, and it'll become the final chronological speeches the man gave before he was assassinated, including the presentation he made for SNCC in Selma, Alabama on February 12th, 1965. There's no question that Malcolm had a clear focus on Africa, and he understood that as our future goes, it'll go only where Africa takes it. He understood that clearly, and he articulated that without any confusion whatsoever. Now, it's understandable that these so-called FBA people and all these folks want to claim any U.S.-born African freedom fighter is theirs, because they don't have anybody else to validate their claims. They don't have any justification. They don't have any credibility. So, of course, they're going to have to dig and find some people that can do that. So they're reaching now for Kwame, for Malcolm, for Dr. King, for Huey P. Newton, everybody. Claims that Africans born within the U.S. possess some specific characteristics that separate us from other Africans. I mean, whenever we hear that, I know that you have studied zero. I was just in Africa last month. Every time I go to Africa, I see 20, 25 people that look just like people I know here. Just like them. Move the same way. I saw my stepdaughter. My wife and I saw my stepdaughter. She was walking across the street. We're like, that's her. That's her. She's right there. I saw my dad at the marketplace. He was selling clothes. I said, man, he's like, coming to my shop. I'm like, brother, I'm not going to buy nothing from you, but you look so much like my daddy. My daddy's been dead 26 years. I have to hug you. I have a weird thing. I don't really like to take a picture like that. It's just, I don't know, it's disrespectful to me, but I have to hug the brother. And he said, oh, yeah, well, come on and hug me. He's like, I look like your dad. I said, how old are you? And he said he was 75. I'm like, man, you could be. And he said, we might be related. And he's absolutely right. Because when they put us on the slave ships, they didn't separate us based on, well, you're a foundational Black American. They put your mother on one ship. They put your father on another ship. They put your black ass on a third ship. And we're all separated as a result of that. And now you fools want to walk around here today uplifting this colonial definition of who the hell we are. And we're not going to let you get away with that. We're not going to let you get away with that. These false colonial-based differences serve zero interest in helping us as a people collectively. For people concerned about justice, the definition on our struggle can never be micro-nationalist defined. It can never be that. That means only looking at one small portion of our people. Even if Africans in the U.S. were rich, like if 50 million Africans in the U.S. got $1 million today, that could only happen if one thing happened. Since the wealth of the Western capitalist empire is largely based on exploiting Africa, the only way every African in the U.S. could be rich is further exploitation of Africa. That's the only way that can happen. Now, I know some of you don't care about that. You don't care about it because all you are is opportunists. You just want to get a paycheck. I get that. So I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the masses of Africans who are trying to figure out what all this means. That you cannot be a part of anything that exploits any sector or segment of our people anywhere on earth. As Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. You align yourself with this backward system, you're never going to be safe. You'll get a check. There, you put enough pressure, they'll eventually give you a check. But then they'll put a, you know how they have the where you sign the check, you know the conditions under which the check can be cashed. They'll put on, you can't talk about racism ever again once you sign this check. And many of you Negroes will sign it because you just want the money. You're not thinking about anything beyond tomorrow. And so then the next time you experience racism, no, you can't say that. You cash that check, that's over with. That's it. Go spend your money at the rim store because they'll have a reparations rims sale. You don't even need the money yet, and they'll give you the rims on your car, and then when you get the check, it'll go straight to them. So eventually all that money will go right back to them. And we're not even thinking about this beyond that. You know, we just want some money right now. We are sellouts. That's all you are, is sellouts. Some of us are not sellouts. We will not compromise 1 inch until Africa is free, united, and socialist. So we definitely want to thank you for joining us today. We invite you back next week. Join us next Sunday, March 1st, the start of Women's History Month. We're going to do a program on our sister Assata Shakur, the legacy of Assata Shakur. So please join us next week, same time, same space. The red and white QR code in the upper left is for all of our programs. We have a number of AAPRP programs, so we invite you to participate in them. Hopefully we can get all our audio. We miss having Shakura here doing it together with her, so we'll try to figure that out for next time. But the Forward Ever Shop, you can buy clothes that articulate messages that support our struggle and help us create some money so we can do our work at home in Africa. So please do that. Support the Forward Ever Shop, that red and white QR code there. Those of you here where I am in Northern California, we invite you to come out to our community self-defense. We had a wonderful session last Thursday. Every Thursday night, we have it. 2775 Cottage Way, cottage like cottage cheese, 2775 Cottage Way, Unit 15. You can come out. You don't need to sign up. You don't need to register. People go, well, where do I register? Just come into class and participate. You're just so used to this bourgeois bureaucracy. Like, we're not doing all that. Just come in, you know, and participate. Be a part of a community. That's all. So come out. Last Thursday, we had 6 p.m., 6 to 8 p.m. every Thursday night. We had a wonderful session. We do political education. We had a brother bring an article. We talked about the complex legacy of Reverend Jesse Jackson. Then we had another regular participant in the class do a how to stop bleeding wounds training. It was great. And then we went and we spent the rest of the class practicing movement and how to throw a proper punch so you don't hurt yourself hitting someone. And we practice karate, kaji kumbo, so we do the whole bit. But because we have the bleed training, we had less time last Thursday. But this Thursday we'll get full into our kaji kumbo training. So we invite you to come out. If you're not in this area, invite people. Join the AAPRP. Go to AAPRPINTL.org. The black and white QR code in the bottom right is for our work in the Sahel region, Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali. So click on that, become a monthly sponsor, and support that work, okay? And then my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. The QR code is right next to it there. It's only $8 US. Buy it if you don't have it. It's a great organizing book. Call your bookstore, get it in your bookstore. Call your library, get it in their store, forum study groups to read it. 100%, not 50%, not 90%, 100% of the proceeds go towards anti-fascist work. I buy a lot of materials for the community defense class, for example, based on proceeds I get from the book, right? So do that. Support all the struggle. Join an organization if you're not in one. Forward ever, backwards never. Enjoy the rest of your day. But stay strong, be vigilant.